Hey everyone, welcome back. Dave in History for the Ages here. So I haven't done one of these quizzes in a while, and so I thought I'd do one on the Middle Ages. First, remember, please like, subscribe, leave comments. It's always great. Share these videos with others. I've done some other quizzes before. I did one on ancient history, general history, World War II, Napoleon. Leave some links in the descriptions to that playlist. You could watch those. And I have 15 questions here. Let's see how many you can get right. I'll start from the easy questions, go to the harder ones. And also know that I do actually have a playlist just on the Middle Ages as well. So after you watch this, I'll leave those links in the description as well. And you could just, see how you do. And if you didn't do as well, you could learn all about the Middle Ages. If you're a homeschooler, I've got unit studies you can get as well on those. All that information's on my channel. But let's get right to it here. Let's see how you do on the first question. All right, so question number one. What do we call the plague that swept through Western Europe towards the end of the Middle Ages? And so we are referring to what we generally call the Black Death. Most people think it was the bubonic plague that did this. And of course, it devastated Western Europe dramatically and had a really big impact in just changing the whole course of Western civilization history. So that's question number one. All right, question two. This man here, you see, was the famous leader of the Franks who was coronated as emperor in the year 800 AD and made it multiple choice. Is it A, Charlemagne, B, Henry V, C, Julius Caesar, or D, Henry VIII? And the answer to that is A, Charlemagne, Charles the Great. I have a whole video on him too, specifically in that Middle Age playlist you can watch. All right. Question three. The Hundred Years' War, which actually lasted more than 100 years, was fought between what two nations? Germany and France, Germany and England, France and England, or Spain and England? And the answer to that is C, France and England. So that would be question number three. They will get harder, so hopefully you've gotten the first three right. All right, question four. What famous document did King John agree to in the year 1215? Was it the Edict of Nantes, Edict of Milan, or Magna Carta? And the answer to that one is C, Magna Carta. Edict of Nantes, actually pretty important as well. Edict of Nantes is an edict that gave a religious toleration to the Huguenots. It's all part of some French history. Edict of Milan, that was going back to the time of Constantine, which granted religious tolerations for Christians inside of the Roman society. So those are a couple of important topics that I cover in some other lectures of mine. All right, question five. Now I'll make them a little bit harder. So in the feudal system, when a lord gives a piece of land to another noble, that noble becomes his serf, a slave, a vassal, or a king. And the answer is C, vassal. All right, C, vassal. So in that question is still, I think, pretty easy. Now they're going to get a little harder, and that's a picture of what we would call a manor in the Middle Ages. If you see that picture, what's it of? It's a manor. All right, question six. When marriage takes place in the Middle Ages, it was common for the family of the bride to give a gift to the groom. What is this known as? A sacrament, dowry, indulgence, or a ketubah? And the answer to that is B, dowry. Ketubah is actually, I threw that in there for fun. It's a kind of when Jewish people get married, they sign a ketubah. All right. Question seven. All right. During the Great Schism, so one pope lived in Rome and the other pope lived in what city? So now they're going to get us really a little bit more. You have to some bit more knowledge of history of the Middle Ages to get these, I think. London, Paris, Avignon, or Strasbourg. And so which of those cities, and hopefully you know what the Great Schism is. It was a time period where you had two popes at the same time because they couldn't agree who would be the legitimate pope. And the answer to that was C, Avignon, which is a city in France, actually. All right, question eight. Thomas Becket was the Archbishop of York, Canterbury, or Paris? And the answer to that is B, Canterbury. I've actually been there, pretty cool. There is one crazy story there about Thomas Becket and Henry II. I have, again, a video on that as well in my History of the Middle Age playlist. You definitely want to check that one out. It's a crazy story. I wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's nutty what happened there inside that cathedral to poor Thomas Becket. I'll just leave you with that, and you can watch the video to learn more. All right, question nine. Oh, this is cool. What was the name of the tapestry that depicted the conflict between William and Harold? William the Conqueror, and this is Harold as well. And this is one of my favorite things to show to my students. It's called the Becket Tapestry. I have a little 2-minute short video I made on the Becket Tapestry. If you've never heard about it, super cool as well. And so I have a little 2-minute short. You can find my channel on that one. All right, question 10. No multiple choice here. Let's just see if you know this one. What is primogeniture? I ask this to my students often, and very few students actually know that term. And simply, primogeniture means the eldest son inherits. And you go, what does that have to do with the Middle Ages? Well, this was a very common practice in the Middle Ages, that if you had multiple sons, it would be the eldest son that would inherit the land and the real estate and so forth. All right, so that's question number 10. 11. Charles the Hammer was victorious at which of these battles? Agincourt, Tours, Hastings, or the Battle of Milvian Bridge? And so the answer to that, give you a second to think about it, is B, Battle of Tours. Battle of Agincourt was actually another battle during the 100 Years' War. Battle of Hastings has to do with the previous question. That was a battle that William the Conqueror was victorious, 1066. Battle of Milvian Bridge, again, some ancient history there. That was a battle that Constantine fought back in the day. All right, question 12. Who was the King of England during the Third Crusade? So the whole story of the Crusades, pretty important events actually, and it happens to be a little hint if you haven't figured it out yet. Probably the most famous person we associate with the Crusades from the West, and it was King Richard I, or Richard the Lionhearted. So maybe some of you knew that one. All right, hopefully you're keeping track how many of these you got right. All right, question 13. All right, next few questions. These are just a few questions left, so I kind of made them tough. So Henry IV had a conflict with which pope? Leo III, Boniface VIII, Innocent III, or Gregory VII? And this answer is D, Gregory VII. Pretty crazy story there. Again, and I have another video about that. But it's a pretty crazy story when the king is forced to kind of stand in the snow for a while, begging forgiveness from a pope. Again, if you want a little tease on that, if you want to know the whole story, go watch that video on Henry IV and Gregory VII. All right, Gregory of Tours gives us a history of which Germanic tribe? Saxons, Lombard, Franks, Visigoths, or Vandals? And so Gregory of Tours is one of our primary sources in the early Middle Ages, and the answer is C, Franks. Specifically, it talks about Clovis. Again, very important guy in the early history of the Franks. So Gregory of Tours is one of our early primary sources from the Middle Ages. And last question here. This king of England also became the king of France when he was just a 2-year-old baby. I love this story. Is it Henry IV, Henry V, Henry VI, or Henry VIII? Love your Henrys, right? And of course, the answer is C, Henry VI. And if you don't know about that story, it's kind of the tail end of the 100 Years' War again. Henry VIII is one with all the wives, right? Henry V is very famous also from the 100 Years' War before him. But it was Henry VI. He inherited the throne of England because of a treaty. He was also the king of France. And so for a very short time period, yeah, there's still 2-year-old king of England, king of France. All right, so how did you do, right? So, pretty interesting how you did on this quiz. If I would say if you got like all of them right, great. All of them right, great. If you only got like, less than 10, you're probably doing okay. If you only got like 4 or 5 of them, you probably need to really watch all my history lectures on the history of the Middle East. History of the Middle Ages. So anyways, I'll leave some links in the description where you can kind of find more stuff on the Middle Ages. You can, look through my channel and my playlist there. Try the other quizzes. See how you do on my other quizzes. See if you do better or worse on any of them. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for playing. Make sure you share. Bye.